9 schools in Scotland started using facial recognition on students to pay for lunches this week. The system, which has been implemented at schools across North Ayrshire, is said to speed up transactions and reduce queues. Its proponents argue that it's also a more hygienic approach than card payments and fingertips in a post-COVID world. Well, Carol Ford is the Scottish Liberal Democrat spokesperson for schools and education, and I'm delighted to say joins me now. Carol, this sounds a little bit sinister.
Well, I would agree with you there. I mean, facial recognition technology is a pretty intrusive technology, and really it shouldn't be considered in schools unless there's a very clear need for it. There are ways of safeguarding the whole system in terms of data and possible discrimination. And also, it is actually the best solution to a problem. Now, if you look at school dinners, I'm actually a former head teacher, and I've had experience in 10 different secondary schools around the west of Scotland. And I can tell you that the queues in school dining rooms are not caused by the payment method. They're caused by the amount of time it takes to actually serve the food in a cafeteria style. So this is a problem that doesn't really need such a drastic solution. Not only that, there is a biometrics commissioner in Scotland, but the Scottish Government has ensured that the remit for that commissioner only runs to the justice system, nothing to do with education or health. So we don't even really have a robust safeguarding system in relation to this kind of technology. And finally, it isn't the best solution. It is not necessary to have this kind of method used in a school dining room. The thing that really bothers me about it also is that, I mean, a lot of money and time and effort must have gone into this. And there are other problems that could be being solved, particularly in relation to a school dining room. Scotland has one of the worst health records in Europe, and we should be concentrating on healthy eating and encouraging secondary children especially to eat in school dining halls instead of going to the nearest fast food outlet. So this is an introduction of a technology that's completely inappropriate in a school, and it's solving a problem that doesn't really exist, the time it takes to pay for your food.
It seems to be an incredibly expensive and laborious solution to a problem that, as you say, seems to not be particularly at the forefront of all the problems facing people at school. I wonder what's behind this. What's the ideology that's driving this up in Scotland? What we've seen is the new COVID pass being legally enforceable from Monday this week, facial recognition appearing in schools, a new centralised police force, getting rid of all the old local police forces to one police Scotland outfit. Scotland's turning into a bit of an authoritarian state, isn't it?
Well, I'd have to say, as Liberal Democrats, we are certainly very concerned. We have opposed the vaccine passport system, not just on Liberal grounds, but in sheer practicality. It's not working. We have a passport system at the moment that can be easily screenshotted so that you can use somebody else's QR code. So even on those grounds, it doesn't work. But we are very concerned about this increasing access of bodies who shouldn't have it, access to people's personal data. And facial recognition is simply something that's not necessary in a school. I mean, the place where people have encountered that up until now has been at airport terminals, and they are not the kind of places that are particularly conducive to anybody's well-being. And if schools are concerned about people's well-being, as they should be, this kind of anonymous technology, there's just no place for it. And as I said, it's a problem that just doesn't really need solving.
What the government might say in response to that is, of course, there is a country on the other side of the world that is ploughing ahead with all of these different sort of forms of social credit, of facial scanning. It's just putting up a new space station as it stands. China seems to be relatively successful, if incredibly authoritarian. Is that not an argument that potentially the Scottish Government might look to the East and see that, OK, people might not be having the most liberal time of it, but there's somehow an economic success that could be gained from this sort of state intervention?
Well, certainly, again, as a Liberal, I would say that that's not a price worth paying. And it's actually slightly ironic because our First Minister has actually given a TED talk on the subject of the fact that a country should not just be judging its prosperity in terms of the GDP, but in terms of well-being, that well-being should be as important as financial success. And yet, you know, they appear to be trying to turn our schools into some kind of, you know, nameless institution. That's just not the way to go. So there's a liberal argument against it, but there's also a real well-being argument that we don't want people to be anonymous. We actually want people to feel, particularly in schools, that they are an individual who counts for something. And I really cannot see that taking nanoseconds of a transaction is a thing to be spending any money, time or effort on at all. Yeah. There are much more important things that the education
Carol
system
Ford,
should be looking at.
Scottish Liberal Democrat, spokesperson for schools, I have to say I agree with you completely on that issue. We really shouldn't be looking towards China as a society to emulate, and the individual matters most of all. Thank you so much for joining us this morning on The Briefing. A really
Not at all.
discussion there.
Thank you.